News on Media. This is Coming Out Stories. It's a podcast about one of the most important conversations of your life. I'm Emma Goswell. We're now off to the Bronx to speak to Jose, a Puerto Rican man. He's now happily settled down with his boyfriend. Please be aware, though, that this story is very harrowing and does include details of sexual abuse, exploitation and addiction. It was also recorded in the foyer of the Bronx Art Museum, so you may hear a bit of chit-chat in the background.
I was definitely not like the other boys. I used to take my mother's clothes and play drag, I guess, when I was 6 years old. So everybody thought it was funny, because I would imitate my mother, but deep down inside it felt so comfortable, but I never really shared that. And as a matter of fact, this is the first time I'm sharing that.
Wow, yeah. Okay. So did you do it for a few years? Did you really enjoy dragging
I did it for, I would say, more than a few years. This was a constant show. Yeah.
Okay. And did you ever get the sense that, what I'm doing is wrong, or I shouldn't be doing it, or you were just sort of encouraged?
I knew it was wrong in my mother's eyes, my father's eyes, so I kind of made it, I masked it as a joke, and I didn't make it appear like I felt very comfortable doing it. So it was more like a mocking situation, and I guess that's how I got through it.
And then when you got a bit older, did you think, actually these feelings that I'm having are something bigger?
Yeah, so the first time that I really acted out on these feelings, I was about 13 years old, and I was going through these awful newspapers, these nasty old newspapers that I found in the subway, and one of them was called, I don't know if I should mention, it was called Screw Magazine, and it had all kinds of different advertisements in it, but they had one for a group called the Gay and the Young, and this was being held in a church. I was 13 years old, and I decided to call them and just pop in, and I did. So what happened was that I showed up, and I think I was the only 13-year-old.
Which church was this? So where were you living at the time?
At this time, I was in the city. I was living in Manhattan. I grew up in the Bronx, lived in Manhattan for a while, then we moved back to the Bronx. Okay. So this was off of 2nd Avenue and like the 30s, 31, 32. 32nd Street, something like that. So it was held in the basement. Oddly enough for me at the time, the priest had a live-in janitor, which was also his boyfriend. So,
and was he out in the church?
I don't think he really was, but he was out when he went down to the basement in the youth group, so everybody knew.
So they actually put an advert in a paper in New York advertising for gay people to go to a church?
Right. It was called the Youth Aid and Advocacy Program. And that's how it was advertised. Unfortunately, they popped up in the news a few years later because it actually ended up being a prostitution ring.
Oh my God.
So the owners were exploiting the young kids. I went to a few interviews that they wanted me to go to just to have some work after school and some extra cash. And it turned out to be dirty old men. And after my second interview going out, I decided to quit. It wasn't for me.
So you saw the abuse firsthand?
Yeah, I sure did. I saw the abuse and the progress of some of the kids that went through their first interview, and a couple of months later they were in the street living off their johns, living off the people that were making money off.
So they were recruiting them to work in the sex industry?
Yeah, absolutely. They got sued and everything.
But while you were going through all this, were you telling your parents where you were going, or was this totally secret for you?
Absolutely not. During the same period, my father was he was a World War II veteran, and my mother was a housewife. They raised 9 kids together. My mother was that submissive type, and my father was that militant guy. And at 13, I remember Mom was not feeling well, so I went on ahead and started washing the dishes for her and doing some of the cleaning. I got thrown out at the age of 13.
For what?
For washing dishes and cleaning the house, which was something men don't do. The women did that. So,
wow.
Yeah. It was really bad because there was not a really good transition between the cultures, right? So now we come from Puerto Rico, this machismo kind of attitude that people had there. Also, he was a military guy. That militant attitude stayed with him. Also, my mother was the subservient, right? So she was the submissive to that.
Do you think there was an element of he thought you might be gay and that was the reason that he threw you out?
Of course. Yeah, it had to be. This was something that was not accepted. We were devoted Catholics. I remember growing up, we used to cater to the priests that used to come in from Spain. So growing up, I had a priest in my house, sleeping in my bed all the time. So how odd is that?
What, in your bed while you were there, in it?
Yeah. Creepy, right? Exactly.
And nothing happened. It was just that was just the way it was.
Not that I can remember, unless if I was drugged or something as a kid, but nothing happened. No.
So how old were you? You were 13 and you're thrown out of the home.
Right.
How did your mum react? She must have been upset.
She reacted the same way she would when my father threw everyone else out the house. She would cry and just go inward, and but she wasn't in a position to not let it happen.
So where did you go then at the age of 13 and you're in the Bronx at this stage?
Yeah, I got a hold of my sister who lived in North Carolina at the time, and I moved in with her.
So at what stage did you actually come out? Because you were thrown out for supposedly just washing dishes, but at what stage did you ever tell your family that you were gay?
I never told my mom or my dad. It was something, I guess, that was just unspoken. It was clear that I didn't have any girlfriends and I didn't have any intentions on having a girlfriend, but it was unclear exactly what I was because we never spoke about it. So they never asked me, I never said anything. And my mother passed away in 2009 and I never said anything to her at all. The last thing that she said was that I love you. So.
And any regrets for not telling her, or are you that's just the way it was, it wasn't going to change?
There was no regrets. Well, I can't say that I don't regret not telling her, but I do regret not telling her what happened to me at 5, when I was 5 years old.
Which was?
So I was sexually abused at the age of 5.
And you never told anyone?
No, never. Never. And when something like that happens to you as a kid, somehow something takes place that your mind puts it in a box until you're able to resolve it or come back to it and deal with it later on. It was in the box for a long time.
Did you have to go to therapy then? Did that help?
Yeah, so in the whole path of destruction that happened throughout my youth, I had an array of losses. I also turned to drugs and alcohol. It was when I went into rehab that I decided to, but it popped out during therapy. So that's when I started to first disclose it, and it was not a good time for me.
I guess that's something that's incredibly hard to put a lid on. Do you feel like you've ever had closure on that? Or?
No, never. Nobody knew about it. I tried to confront her about it, and it was a taboo subject. He would not talk about it. He came up with some excuse of religion or him not being well and being sick. He got diagnosed with PTSD and depression and all kinds of stuff, which, by the way, I'm now diagnosed with PTSD and depression because of everything that's happened and all these series of traumatic events.
Did you tell any of your other siblings? I don't know how many of you are there, but did you tell any of your other siblings about being gay even?
Yes. The first one that I came out to was my niece that I grew up with, and I was about 14 or so. And I told her, guess what? I like guys. I really like guys. And she goes, yeah, and I already knew that, because we were like, and this was back in the 80s, so I was very careful back then who I told, because there was still that stigma, with being gay, and also back then was with the HIV and AIDS epidemic.
I'm guessing the 1980s in New York wasn't a great time to come out, particularly with the AIDS epidemic.
No, it really wasn't. But there was the extremes of everything, So we had that leather culture. We had all kinds of stuff going on. It gave a lot of kids during at that time different opportunities or different things to do, in the city.
So did you embrace it? Because there's a big gay scene in Manhattan, right?
I did everything.
Yeah.
I did everything. I had leather this, leather that. There was a big cowboy scene with the cowboy hats and the cowboy boots. I did that as well. There was a punk rock thing going on, so I spiked my hair up and colored it as well. This was, I guess, the beginning stages of the Vogue things that was starting, the houses of extravaganza and so forth. So I was in the midst of all this. Also, there were a few iconic figures still around from the Stonewall days. So there was one called Marsha
P. Johnson.
Johnson, yes. So I remember.
You met her?
Yes. So I'm walking down the street on Christopher Street as a young little 14-year-old because that's what happened. And she would say, "You're out here again, little boy." She goes, where are you going to school? Aren't you supposed to be in school? And I said, "No, whatever." She would reach into her pocket and give me $1. She said, go get you a coffee or something to drink. And she did that often, every time I would go down. And this was, again, back in the 80s, I was about 14 or so. So
she was an absolute legend.
She is an absolute legend. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was her. There was another person named Flo that was like Marsha, and she was iconic as well.
So did you come out to the rest of your family at all? Any of your other siblings? Or?
After I was older, I did. I was in my 20s. I was actually 25 or 6. I purchased a home when I was 28. I took the liberty of saying, "Hey, everybody come over, have a barbecue and everything." And I kind of made it official, where I had a partner. This is my partner. This is who I am. This is what it is. And I had that platform, from which I could stand proudly and say, "I'm gay." So
you had a coming out party?
I guess you could say
barbecue.
Barbecue, sausages, anyone?
This is a first. I've interviewed a lot of people. I've never heard of anyone having a coming out barbecue, but I like the idea of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's on my terms. You tell me just how much hot sauce you want on everything.
And everyone was pretty cool.
Yeah, because I took everybody on like individually, kind of. It was like, okay, this is where I'm at, and this is my life. This is me.
But those ages between 13 and 25, I'm guessing you went through the mill a bit because, you were essentially thrown out and had to fend for yourself, really. You lived with a sister, but then you ended up back in Manhattan, obviously.
Those were the years where I started experimenting with drugs, and I acted out sexually. I acted out with drugs. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew that I needed to maintain a drug habit, which I had just gotten into, and I would go to work every single day. I started working from the age of 13, forcefully because I got thrown out and I didn't have any income. But officially at the age of 16, I was working full time. So I never stopped working. I had a good 30-year run of working. So
what do you do for a living? What do you do?
I'm retired right now, forcefully, but I'm a door control specialist. So I was a glorified, high-paid mechanic that fixed doors.
Okay.
That was what I did for close to 30 years.
Yeah. So you obviously came out to some of your family and your friends, but did you ever come out at work as well, professionally?
That's a good question. Because I was a mechanic, the environment that I was in did not lean towards having that gay employee that did the same kind of work that everyone else did, that the rest of the guys did, which were heterosexual, I'm assuming. It was not a good environment to say that you're gay and to partner up with somebody and do work and have them be comfortable with that. There was a lot of prejudices and biases and stigmas associated with people that were gay.
So you never came out to an employer or a colleague?
No, it was very hard. I think I may have disclosed to one or two, and that was not a bad decision, but it was an awful situation that took place afterwards because now I was outed in the company. I was treated differently. It was not a good environment.
And that's so difficult when you're at work at least 8 hours a day, aren't you? And to hide who you really are for that long, it's got to be detrimental, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Especially, you try to deal with it as best as possible, but when you when you hear of situations that the bosses are marking you and making fun of you, and everybody's calling you all kinds of derogatory names, and oh, the faggot that works here, oh, the cocksucker, just name it. I was called everything in the book. You didn't see it face to face. When I showed up to work, it was never a cocksucker. It was a cocksucker, a sucker as soon as I turned my back.
Of course.
Yeah.
So you only found out about it retrospectively?
Yeah, as soon as I walked out the door.
Kind of makes you realise, doesn't it, sometimes when, gay people do sometimes put themselves in stereotypical gay book of jobs, one of my friends calls it, you know. A lot of gay people do end up in the theatre or end up in entertainment or working cabin crew or being a hairdresser, and it's a stereotype, but you kind of think, well, there's probably a reason for that. Because some environments are easier to come out at work, aren't they?
Yeah, certainly, but not in the industry that I was in, because it's always like this macho kind of guy who's outdoor in all kinds of weathers, handling doors and being a mechanic and dealing with tools and all that. So it didn't afford for gays to integrate into that field because of the physical labor that was involved. You know, so it was kind of difficult to also find other people that were gay within the industry because it wasn't a shared environment.
The thing is, they will be there, won't they?
Yeah, well, you know, let me be the first one to say I was gay and I was doing it, and a lot of people didn't even know. But
you've had a good career, and have you had successful, happy relationships as well?
I believe in long-term relationships. So I was in a 25-year relationship. That was part of the series of losses, and that was one of my last losses. So that didn't end pretty well.
So currently single and looking...
No.
Oh.
I'm in a 6-year relationship going on 7. Very happy. His name is Albert Rodriguez. He's a wonderful guy. I love him dearly. 6 year in, and we're happy.
Would you be considering marriage and wedding bells and all that sort of stuff?
You know, it's dingling, dangling, and all around. I'm not sure. Definitely be something to consider. And if I were to consider it, it would probably be with him.
Wow, okay. So, if you were to be able to speak to your 13-year-old self again, what would you say? What advice? Because you faced a lot of dark stuff in your life.
That would be very difficult to say right now.
But you're happy now. You've had some really good years and some good relationships.
Yeah, I guess I would tell me not to worry, get better.
What about if you were to speak to just other kids on the streets, maybe growing up in the Bronx where we're sat now? Would you have any advice in terms of coming out as LGB or even T?
Yeah, you know, there's so many things I would love to say. One is be yourself, be true to you. Be honest, and let people know if you're comfortable with doing that. But let people know when you do that you are comfortable being you. Yeah, I don't have any regrets. I came out to who I came out to, and I'm fine. It didn't matter.
You're better than fine.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of good looking too.
I should have mentioned that. Big thank you to Jose for really opening up and speaking to us here at Coming Out Stories. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from. We'd also love to hear from you on Twitter. You can find us there at Come Out Stories. I'm Emma Goswell, and Coming Out Stories is a What Goes On media production. Next time round, you'll hear from talented singer-songwriter Katie Brooks. She's from Bristol originally, but grew up in London in a religious cult that was actually based in Arizona in the USA. The cult had huge problems with the fact that she dressed in boys' clothes growing up.
What a message to give a child. If I'm who I am, and I am expressing that in the most beautiful, natural form, and I'm just going with it, I'm a free child, then I'm disgusting, I'm wrong, I should be ashamed, and so should my mother. If I toe the line and I do what you want me to do, and I fit into societal norms, then I'm a good girl and I'm acceptable.